All right, we live, we hot. Oh, no, that's right. I can't steal that from somebody else. What's up, everybody? This is not a show. This is just me, John Marks, on YouTube. And I'll be joined by Kevin Kinkead of Crossing Broad coming up here in just 1 second. But this is the third video that we're doing. It can be viewed live when I do it on the live stream or archived. I believe we're on Instagram. We're on X, formerly known as Twitter. I have actually waiting for my wife to get home, as I'm trying to do this during nap time. So that I got the baby down for a nap, but she's not home yet. So I have the monitor here in case she starts yelling and screaming. I don't know what I'll do in that event. But anyway, a lot to talk about today. I think this is going to be less of a sportsy conversation, as we have a lot that's going on in the world of Philadelphia sports, the media, the fans. Spike Eskin going back to WIP. Let's welcome in Kevin Kinkead of Crossing Broad, who is always on top of these things. What's up, Kev?
What's up, Johnny Marks? You're a good father, you know that?
I am.
Well, I think so. I mean, you're taking care of your daughters and you're, put them down for nap and you got the monitor and everything. Well, how many daughters do we have between the two of us? Five? Five daughters. Yeah.
There's a bunch of people that, when your kids get to school and they're school age, now you become friends with their parents. And so then now you're like friends with them. There's so many dads out there that I'm friends with that have 3 daughters and no sons. So it's like we're the three daughter dad club.
Yeah, Jamie has a couple girls too, right?
2.
He's got 2, so that's 7 between the 3 of us. Did you get your internet figured out? Because you dropped off the show entirely last night, and it was him. He was hosting the John Marks show by himself for a couple.
Right. So I'm expecting some type of a technical issue. We've done 2 of these. There's been technical issues in both. I'm still trying to figure this out. You do this on a regular basis. You have your setup. Is this your office that you're in?
Yeah.
Office?
Yeah, I'm hardwired, because we do the show every Tuesday and Thursday or whatever. So I got the old fashioned cord coming right out of the wall, And
well, that's what I need to do.
Yeah.
But again, this is makeshift until I get this all set up. I'm in the basement. This is just in back of me, it's just a gray wall. I have to get the green screen. Yes. So I'm sure there'll be a technical problem today. And F you to everybody out there that's like, hey, John, why don't you do this? But I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. I'm learning everything on the fly. All right.
Yeah.
I was trying to get Herb from Northeast Philly hooked up. It's a miracle that I even got him on StreamYard somehow, which I did. It took a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But I got it done.
Yeah.
And we're here. All right, so right off the bat, what was your reaction to Spike coming back to WIP, not as a program director, but as the host of the afternoon show, replacing me?
Well, I had no idea. Nobody at WIP seemed to have any idea either. They really kept it under wraps. And initially I was like, oh shit, Spike. That's crazy. And then I paused for, a moment and I was sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, that makes a ton of sense. I don't know if people understand what I'm saying there, but I was surprised by the announcement itself. But then 2 seconds later, I'm like, no, that really fits, that the pattern of what they've been doing over there, internal hires and shuffling people around different Odyssey properties and whatnot. And I have to say, man, my first thought was does Spike want to do this?
Right.
How much was it him wanting to come back to Philly? How much of it was him wanting to get back on the air? How much of it was things not working out at WFAN, or maybe they did and he was just looking for a change? How much of it had to do with, hey, we just filed for bankruptcy, we got to try to make it all work here? Those were the things that were more interesting to me. It was behind the scenes kind of why?
Yeah. I texted with him briefly yesterday just to congratulate him. First of all, I think it's a fantastic move by WIP. The biggest thing is, if it's not broke, there's nothing need to be fixed. Yeah. You need to replace me on the show. So who are you putting in there? You could have slid Jack in, which I think we both thought was either likely or a possibility. I don't know if they didn't think he was ready for it, or when the opportunity with Spike popped up, they decided hey, we could do Jack and that would be fine, or we put Spike in there. But to me, it just makes too much sense. I don't know if a lot of people realize Spike was a jock for a long time. He did why he did YSP. He was before YSP flipped to WIP. He was their midday guy and their music director, I believe. So Spike is a longtime radio guy.
Yeah. Spike was doing well. I mean, if I remember correctly, right, like he was out in Chicago doing DJing for a while, right?
Yep.
And then he came back to WISP. He was working at WISP the same time my wife was working there, and he was doing like the midday show. I want to say,
yeah, it was middays.
Yeah, middays, and when WISP, this isn't anything you don't already know. I guess I'm just saying this to the listeners, but when WISP flipped formats and went to WIP, what the company did was they tried to keep as many of those people inside the company as possible. I don't think they were able to do it with everybody, but like my wife, for example, like they got her a job in the marketing department at television, like at Eyewitness News,
right.
And that's kind of when Spike made his like flip from, doing the DJ and stuff to doing sports. Right. And I want to say like he hosted at night, didn't he, for a little bit, like some
hosted at night. He was doing those, like there were sports minutes or something like that. I forget exactly what they were, but he reinvented himself from being a rock DJ and he got into programming at WIP.
Yeah.
And he became the assistant program director under Andy Bloom. And then he worked his way up. And then when they fired Andy Bloom, he became the guy. And from there, he became the top sports radio programmer in the country. He got the job at WFAN, transformed WIP, rebuilt WIP, brought me in, brought the camera in, kind of changed the page on WIP. But as far as being like, why bring him in to be a host and why would he want to do it? I mean, again, I didn't talk to him about it, but I think in theory, you're the program director at WIP. You've been very successful. You're being like, you looked at what WIP did during the pandemic and you looked at what some other stations did. Other stations didn't do much of anything. Spike actually elevated the brand and created something that was really special. So he goes up to New York with WFAN. It's the top programming job in the country. He's making a ton of money. He gets the vice president tag to it. And you know what? Commuting into the city every day, dealing with Manhattan, dealing with the egos that are in New York. I mean, Kevin, in large part, I just left WIP because it was a quality of life issue. I was just fucking miserable driving in every day and kind of doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
I can imagine without having talked to Spike about it, maybe got old after a while. And in his roots, he's a jock. He likes being on the air, and I leave and they're looking for somebody to replace me. And it's an opportunity for him to get back down to Philly, to be a part of a successful station and a successful show. And I think he just figured that, hey, like I can be a lot happier doing that. Maybe I'm not making as much money, but it's a great job. It's a great opportunity. And it's a great spot. So I'm happy for him. And I think it's a slam dunk hire by WIP.
I think when they give all the company to the lenders anyway, and they make their hire and bring the new person in, and they're instituting all these cost saving measures too. I mean, isn't it easier to get rid of managers than on air people, really? Anyway, maybe there's a safety net in a weird way, because it's like, you could kind of have somebody else run WFAN and do the programming side of it, but if you're the PM drive host at WIP, are they going to come mess with that? It's like, here's an opportunity for you to be this replacement, and maybe there's more job security in that, not saying like, they were looking at Spike in particular, but anybody can be a casualty when you go through a bankruptcy thing. And like you're saying, hey, we got to trim, we got to figure this business out. And maybe that just, I guess what I'm saying is maybe kind of killing two birds with one stone in that sense, or maybe it just solves two problems at the same time. Yeah. But I think is what makes a lot of sense, man, is like, now you got three people on that afternoon show who each have a different specialty and who are really good at various sports. Spike's really good at basketball. Jack's obsessed with the Phillies, as we all know. And Ike played for the Eagles, I mean, you're really hitting on everything that you talk about there. I mean, nobody's really talking about the Flyers, obviously, so you don't have to hit that. But that show covers a lot. Covers a lot now,
Yeah, it does. And I agree with you that like Jack's very talented with social media and digital stuff or whatever. Ike is working with Ike. He's a bigger sports fan than me. So he's watching late NBA games when I'm dead asleep, and I'm looking at box scores when I wake up in the morning. But like Ike is a huge sports fan, so you never have to worry about that. He's watching all the shows in the morning, the skip shows, and like first things first, and whatever. And I don't really have any interest in that. So like he's got all that covered. No. And Spike is a huge idea guy as well, and you knew that from him being a program director.
Yeah,
he's got huge ideas, and now from the chair of being a lead host, and I'm assuming he's going to be the lead host, right? Like he's going to drive the show. He's going to drive the show. So, I mean, I think the show is going to be extremely successful, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it sounds like. Ike and Spike already have great chemistry,
Mhm.
right? From working together before. They have their NBA stuff that they like to go back and forth with. And Jack's very talented, and I think Jack could have very easily been the first chair. But this doesn't now. Now he's under pressure. Now he can go back to kind of being the third mic. He can do his Fritz at 6. I'm assuming he's going to continue to do Fritz at 6. He can do his baseball, Phillies podcast. He can do all the other stuff. Without having to be kind of forced into being the lead host and taking over for me right away.
Let me ask you a question, because I hear this take out there, and we've talked about it on our show before, but it's like the take goes, sorry, let me mute my phone. This telemarketer's been trying to call me all day long. I don't know why they just do it over and over again. People saying like WIP is so far ahead of the Fanatic that you could replace John Marks with anybody and they would still win. When you hear people say that, does that offend you?
No, not at all.
Okay, because it's because people are saying like, because what I was like reading on a lot of different comments and things like that, they're saying, well, Jack's kind of young, maybe he's still green, but he could do a good job at it. But then they would kind of talk themselves into it by saying Fanatic isn't putting on much resistance anyway. I mean, so if you're going to take a gamble on somebody who quote unquote, might have been not ready yet, then that might be the justification for it,
Yeah, no, I actually agree. I don't think you can put anybody in there because chemistry matters in talk radio. So you put somebody in there and the chemistry doesn't work, then it's going to be awkward and people are going to not want to listen to it. But I mean, reality is that, and this is what I'll always go back to, when I took over almost 7 years ago, WIP wasn't winning. You know what I mean? Like WIP was losing the mic. I don't even think we're a top 5 show when I took over. And Chris Carlin didn't have a lot of time to build. He was only there for a couple of months before I went in. So right. I know 7 years ago that you couldn't put anybody in that spot and you would beat the Fanatic. They were losing. With the exception of Josh, for 11 months, he beat Mike. That afternoon drive was the Fanatic with Mike Miss since 2009. It took Mike a year from April 2008. It was April 2009 when he overtook WIP and didn't give it up except for that stretch where Josh first came in and then Josh burned out. But no, like, and for people that say the show's set up for success, so you could have brought somebody else in, but I think Spike, for a lot of different reasons, I think Spike can grow the show. I think Spike can actually make the show bigger than it was with me. So
it's interesting, man, because like they. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I think people kind of like kind of lose sight of, how sloppy things got like at the tail end of the Andy Bloom era. Where they had the whole crazy thing with Josh Innes, and that was the height of when Kyle Scott doing like original radio wars, when people were sending roses back and forth and all that crap, and Andy's thing was always like he was looking for the next Howard Stern, everybody was always looking for like the next Howard Stern. I guess, because he thought Josh was that, but the way that they kind of fast tracked Josh from nights to days and, displacing people along the way, that pissed a lot of people off over there. And it created a bad environment and things weren't great at WIP. And I know that for a fact because that's when I was still at Channel 3 and we were working with those guys all the time because we were both owned by CBS and we were sister stations. And I was producing that Sunday night television show over there that nobody ever watched, like at 11:45 at night. But like they would always come over and like they'd always, people would talk about the atmosphere over there. So I think what I'm trying to get to here is like Spike deserves a lot of credit for coming in afterwards and like stabilizing that and getting WIP back to what WIP is and just streamlining the day part lineup, bringing you in, making some other shuffles and saying, this is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to get it back. And like, ever since he came in and changed that, WIP has been dominating in the ratings. So you can't argue against that. And people say like our, we had some New York friends who would tell us about WFAN and what was going on up there. And, Sean Marash and other guys like that come in and maybe it gets a little takey or whatever, but WFAN is still killing ESPN radio up there, right? So you can, it's like what you said on our show, man, when you came on and you were like, look, nobody can argue with, that approach and like the programming aspect of it. So, I mean, Spike really came in and turned WIP around when Andy Bloom had kind of left it under, unsure footing,
Well, and I had said this actually on the air before I left, which was when I came to WIP wasn't the WIP it is right now, right? Like Spike brought in Joe, Spike brought in John Ritchie. He rebuilt the station. He brought me in, and like had a bad reputation. You know, Spike and I having conversations, I believed in him just as much as he believed in me, right? Like he told me he was going to turn the station around. WIP was toxic for a while there before Spike came back.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah,
it was
really
like,
was. Yeah.
a lot of the employees will tell you that. But we have a comment up on the screen that said if you read the comments across WIP's social media accounts, they're 90% negative on Spike. WIP has no idea who their audience is. Well, what I would say to that is that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Because if 99% of Twitter, Instagram, whatever social media is ripping the move, that doesn't matter. I was on a thread last night. I didn't even know what it was from, but it was complaining about Chuck. And we'll talk about Chuck from Mt Airy in a second. Might have been something that you guys put out. And it was complaining about Chuck. And I turn it off. Every time one of the regular callers call in, I want one a week. I want Tom Bigby back. Like WIP's terrible. And reality is WIP's never had more listeners. WIP's never had a firmer grasp on the city as far as dictating sports content. I mean, Jesus Christ, Bryce Harper was listening to our show and hit a home run for Chuck from Mt Airy. You know, Jack and Trey Turner and what we did in the afternoon with kind of bringing that story to light. Like, you may not like it, and you may not like Chuck from Mt Airy. Everybody's a consumer. You don't have to like it. But you can't argue with the results, right? Like, the results are winning. And if you think that Spike Eskin, because 90% of comments on social media are negative, you think that Spike's going to come in and that show's going to go in the shitter? It's not. It's not going anywhere. The show's not going anywhere. Spike's too good a radio guy, and he's too smart. So don't pay attention. You have to actually have the show first. You have to listen to the show before you can say that everybody's going to hate the show.
Well, my New Year's resolution, I'm not a big New Year's resolution guy because I think if you want to change anything in your life, you can just do it whenever, right? Like if I want to lose weight, why do I got to wait until January 1st to do it? Why not start dieting now? But anyway, my resolution was to try to like do less of like arguing with dipshits in the comments on Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff. And you get sucked in because I get sucked in because it's not like their arguments. It's that their arguments are like logical fallacies or they respond with like non sequiturs. I'm like, is this person that dumb? Like I love debate and I love discussion, but I can't argue with idiots. So I'm trying to avoid it entirely. But the point of me saying that is like, you know, sometimes you'll get somebody like a Crossing Broad person who's like, well, this got like 0 likes and you know, nobody responded to it. Well, I'm looking at Google Analytics and it tells me that 10,000 people read it. So that's really all I can care about and all I should care about. You know, it's just such a fallacy to think that any kind of social media response is indicative of anything and everything. You know, I remember, for example, it's almost like I love using this analogy. It's like when you play. I played in cover bands before, where we would practice like, you know, one song a bunch, and we'd do it at, you know, the All-Star Cafe in Gilbertsville or whatever the hell it's called now, you know. And we would do an awesome job with it. And people would come up after the show and they'd be like, that was all right. You know, and then we'd stumble through like a Paramore cover where like the drummer couldn't even play the kick drum right or whatever. And people coming up to you afterwards and saying, oh, that was awesome, man. You guys did a great job with that song. So like people have no perspective of like how much something resonates or doesn't resonate. The biggest story that we had on Crossing Broad last year was when you remember when that reporter came out and had the Freudian slip and she said that Jalen Carter has a big dick, the NFL Network reporter. Well, I just threw that clip up on the site real quick and it registered in Google News and it got 1 million clicks. 1 million clicks for a 2-sentence story about whatever. So there's the point of me saying all that. 1 million clicks. Yeah, it was the most read story in the history of Crossing Broad, and it was a 2-sentence story about a Freudian slip that an NFL reporter had about Jalen Carter. But point being is like, people don't know what works and what doesn't work or what hits in Google or what doesn't. And I mean, they really have no clue about anything.
Jason says here, WIP wins because they have the rights to the 2 biggest franchises in the city. Competition isn't great from the other station. That's fine. But you know what, and I'll say in particular what the morning show does is they take advantage and they execute with having the 2 biggest franchises in the city, right? Yeah. Like just because you have the franchises doesn't mean that you know what the hell to do with them. And they have Nick Sirianni every week. They have Jason Kelsey every week. They have Brandon Graham every week. They have Rob Thompson during the Phillies season. So unless you do good radio, it's great to have those franchises, and the numbers obviously are going to be the numbers, but you have to take advantage of it. By the way, Jason, I'll just say this, that, like, wasn't that many years ago the WIP had the same franchises and wasn't taking advantage of them. They just weren't. So, everybody, and I get a lot of people to DM me in particular over the last couple of weeks. I don't know if you've seen this, bitching about Jack, sending me screenshots of Jack telling them to F off on DMs or something like that. And my response is just leave him alone. All right, just leave him alone. It's a tough spot to be in.
People went through my DMs. You know how many people I've told to fuck off on DM? You could write an entire book off of like the responses that I've sent to people,
No, so like I'm just like, would you just leave him alone? All right. Like it's when you have a new show and Spike's now coming in, so I think that's going to kind of stabilize it, but just leave him alone, right? Like he's thrust into this where the Eagles are literally falling apart, and he's going to drive the show where he hasn't done it. He's inexperienced driving the show other than filling in for me. But yeah, so listen, I think the show's going to do great. I do.
Yeah, to Jason's point here, you talk about like the radio rights for the Phillies and the Eagles, and you talk about the Fanatic, having the Sixers and the Flyers, and like here's an honest question. I mean, does the Fanatic have any personality there who's stronger on the Sixers or who resonates like more within the Sixers community than Spike right now? Is Bob Cooney or D Lynam or Tyrone? I mean, did they? It was, well, I guess the point I'm trying to make a bigger point here of like, if the Fanatic has the Sixers rights, they should own that and go all in on that. I mean, like when you had Devon there, and he was doing like the pregame, postgame or whatever. It's like Devon's a good basketball mind. Like, if you have these rights, are you getting the most out of these radio rights? Are you having, are you getting exclusives with Daryl Morey? Are you getting Doc Rivers on there? Are you getting Edelman to come on and talk about the arena or something? I feel like the stuff that the Fanatic does have, they don't do a good job of maximizing. I mean, even back in the day, like Mike, the Fanatics never had the Eagles radio rights, but those Friday football shows with like Westbrook were pretty good. And like
awesome.
you would fill in that knowledge. Yeah, and you would fill in those blanks with like good people who would add that, and I just don't feel like they're maximizing. I think that's the point you're trying to make, right? Like WIP takes what they have and then they pull everything they can out of it. Whereas the Fanatic, I don't think they're getting everything they can out of their rights,
No, they're not. And just even with the Sixers in the playoffs, if you look at the ratings over the last few years, we got the bump at WIP. They didn't get the bump. When you have the games, you should get the bump. The old rule of thumb is that the radio's on from the night before the game. So when you get in the car in the morning, it's on the same station, and then you're getting the bump from that. That has not happened. None of the shows got the bump. We got the bump. Now I think part of that, and Anthony's ratings increase more than the other shows because he's a big 76er guy and play the song and everything else. Anthony's fun to listen to when the Sixers were winning. But because they didn't have the run to the finals, I think the negativity of the team helped us at WIP. Because when you lose in the second round and Joel Embiid's failing and Ben Simmons, you're not going to the Fanatic for that. They're coming to us to be negative about the 76ers. Yeah. So we actually took advantage of the Sixers, even though we didn't have the rights. And let me say this also. When I was over at the Fanatic and we did Talking Baseball with Dutch, the Fanatic didn't have the Phillies rights. Right. You know what happened? We owned that 6 o'clock spot with Darren Dalton. We had Mike in the Talking Baseball with Dutch with me. And we crushed WIP. We didn't have to have the rights. People just flipped over if they wanted to listen to the game after Talking Baseball with Dutch. So, if the Fanatics, to your point, if the Fanatics ever going to take advantage of it, they're going to have to do better with what their properties are. Which actually, let's segue over to it here, Kevin. Now, what does the Fanatic do? You guys usually publish the ratings. I didn't actually take a deep dive into what their ratings were for the fall book. I know that we were, Marks and Reese show killed it. We're number one again. And DeCamera and Richie in the mornings, man, to get higher ratings than Angelo. But what do you do if you're the Fanatic now? Because Anthony's gone. Salchunas has been filling in. I don't know if that's permanently what they're going to do. John Kinkead has not lived up to expectations. And I love John. And he's a friend, but the ratings just aren't there. And the city hasn't responded to the show. They have a new program director, Scott Masteller, who I knew from his years working up at ESPN. So I'm familiar with Scott. But if you're the Fanatic, what do you do? They're not going out of business. For everybody out there that says, oh, yeah, well, what format are they flipping to the Fanatic? The Fanatic makes money. The Fanatic makes more money than every station in that cluster than WMMR because it's a profitable sports radio is a profitable format. They're not going anywhere, but it'd be nice if they could actually be more competitive in the city.
Well, don't you kind of have to decide like what you are philosophically? Like, what's your identity? Are you trying to be WIP and you're trying to smash Eagles 80% of the time? Or are you going to maybe go in the other direction and say, maybe we'll try to appeal to some of these people who feel like they've been marginalized? I mean, are we going to try to talk hockey? Are we going to try to talk more basketball? I don't know if that's a smart move or not, but I don't, when I look at WIP, I know what WIP is. The Eagles rights holder, they've got 3 former Eagles, 1 former Eagle on every day part. The formula is there. Lead host, former Eagle, producer who's now able to get on the mic. And, it's, I don't want to use the term playing the hits, but playing the hits works. I mean, like, because WIP knows what it is. They're going to talk Eagles, they're going to talk Phillies, sprinkle in a couple other things. And like whenever I flip that on, I know what I'm getting. I don't really know what the Fanatic's trying to do. Are they just hitting on various things? I mean, you've got Ricky there. He's really, really good with the Phillies. Tyrone knows the Sixers. John has a hockey background and was doing some national radio. I don't really know like what they are. I think their first thing is like, you got to like establish an identity. People come to WIP, they know what it is. People go to Crossing Broad, they know what we do. I think those things are established. Fanatic is just kind of like, they got a hand in this, they got a hand in that. And they're kind of just sort of floating along there. So I don't really know. I don't think that's much of an answer. Did I even answer your question? I guess I just answered a question with a question.
They don't. Yeah, no, they don't know what they don't have an identity. You're right. They don't. Yeah. What's their identity? And I think with the new program director, they will get that. I can already hear when I listen to the station, I can hear a difference. But before it was kind of like they were just on the air and they were doing shows and like I'm not saying the shows are bad or anything like that. And frankly, I wasn't listening a lot to it. But yeah, like WIP, they're gonna talk Eagles. If you want Eagles talk, you're gonna do that. When Mike Miss went to what was then 950 ESPN, and then later became 97.5 The Fanatic, the biggest thing that we had to overcome, and I was working with Mike at the time, the biggest thing that we had to overcome was when big news happened, when breaking news happened. If you're an average Philadelphia sports fan, where do you go? Go to WIP. Right. Yeah. So whenever we had, even when we were beating Howard and we were beating WIP in Afternoon Drive, when breaking news would happen, they would go to WIP. So they would get the spike. We wouldn't get the same spike. But then eventually we did, to where Mike became the place to go for breaking news. It took a little bit of time. I don't even know if that's realistic right now for the Fanatic. I don't know. I don't know what they can be at this point.
Yeah, and they lost the opportunity because a lot of if I've learned anything doing this over like 17 years, I think I've been back here for 15. It's like Philly is such an old school market with media too, that a lot of what it is just attrition. Action News has been number one for God since you and I were teenagers.
40 years.
Right? Yeah,
40 some years.
What let me ask you honestly, like it's a serious question. What has Action News done in those last 40 years? No, nothing. They do the same damn thing. Yeah, it's the same thing over and over and over again. It's like, Jim Gardner or Rick Williams or whatever comes on and says the big story is this house collapsed and L&I is out there looking at it and we're going to go out to Dan Cuellar in the field, rinse and repeat over and over and over and over and over again. And people like it and they're familiar with it. It's like a channel 3. We were like, let's fire this anchor. Let's change the microphone flags. And let's instead of a square desk, we're going to do a curved desk,
News. And then you bring in a new news director and a new GM and a new this and new that. And reality is you're never beating them.
That's right. So I think the Fanatic had to ride that wave where they were branding themselves as the first FM station because that forced a move out of CBS radio to get off of 610 and flip to 94.1. And they were making some headway there. And if they had kept along that path, now you would have 15 years under your belt to try to turn the most old school parochial city in the planet where people have been vacationing at Sea Isle City for 50 straight years. I mean, it's like people are slow to adjust and change their habits here because, for them, like if it ain't broke, they're not going to try to fix it.
Agreed. Blockhead says, I wonder if Spike had a different last name, would people be more receptive to him? The Eskin last name helps and doesn't help him. That makes sense.
It's a double-edged
Spike
sword.
hasn't. Spike hasn't. Like I see a lot of people say, "Oh, if his last name was Johnson, he wouldn't have a job." No, he actually would. He, like you had said, he went to Chicago. He has worked his way up. He has worked his ass off in this business. But I do think that the Eskin last name, it helps him and it hurts him. Yeah, the people would be more receptive to him. I remember when I first started at WIP and it was coming off of Josh, and Josh used to call him Mr. Skinny Pants or something like that.
Yeah,
I got a lot of social media.
Skinny jean bow tie. Skinny jean bow
Right.
tie. Yeah.
I would get a lot of people that would say like, that would like message me or tweet me or whatever and be like, "Oh yeah, you're working for, like for Skinny Jeans or whatever." And I'm like, yeah, like I am. Yeah. And it took about a year. And then the whole Spike doesn't know what the hell he's doing thing was gone and you never heard from it again. But for that first year that he took over, it was definitely, you had the Inish people that were out there that were like, "Oh, you fired Josh. Spike doesn't know what the hell he's doing." And that very quickly subsided and it was gone.
Well, you're always going to have to wear the nepotism thing, whether you like it or not. I mean, what's Spike's only other option other than to change his last name, and disown his family and all that? I don't know how you combat that, but it's like, Mike Missinelli asked me to come on the show and then accused me of being like privileged. So are we all advantageous? Do we all have an advantage or something? I don't know.
You're privileged?
I don't know if you remember that. That was the whole thing about like
I do.
What the unpaid internships, the whole big blow up that we had about that, because who's the NFL? Who's the rich NFL reporter? Jane Slater or something went on said, "Here's a good job opportunity" on Twitter, and it was like an unpaid internship, and
people went crazy.
Yeah. So I wrote like a column about it. Then Mike asked me to come on. This is when Mike was in his like highly politicized phase, and the height of the Trump era, I think. And he's like, "Well, like you're like white kid from the suburbs, like you're privileged." I'm like, well, okay, maybe, I guess, but like my mom worked at McDonald's. I didn't go to like Lower Merion, so.
Right. Yeah. I grew up in Willow Grove, right? Like I was working when I was 14. My dad is still working in his 70s right now. My mom is still working in her late 60s, right? Like just because you're white and from the suburbs doesn't mean you're privileged.
Well, yeah, and like to that point about Spike, it's like, okay, does he have the last name Eskin? Yeah, but did he like hustle when he was in Chicago, and did he like work hard here, and did he create the rights to Ricky Sanchez show, which is like a show basketball brand? I mean, I don't see those things being mutually exclusive, if you get what I'm saying,
Right. And Spike is not his real first name. It's Brett. It's his real first name. So there you go. All right. Well,
maybe that was his way of distancing himself. Maybe that's how he distanced himself from Howard. He just went with a nickname instead of the name that Howard gave him,
Well, Kevin, let me take a brief break here. I have my speaking of privileged, I have my Stanley water cup. Did you get one of these for Christmas? It seems like everybody in the world.
My wife was curious, but she didn't pull the trigger. She found one on Facebook Marketplace in like North Philly for like $50. But
so I have a whole house full of these. So now I have 30 water containers between my kids and my wife, and so like all the Yetis that we were using before are now just relegated to the cupboard. Can't use them anymore. So hold on.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, my wife does yoga multiple times a week, and I do all the dishes. So I just find like a pile of, bottles to, I got to do the baby bottle cleaner thing. Yeah, it's terrible.
All right. Well, Kevin Kinkead of Crossing Broad, I'm going to attempt to share the screen. We've had no technical hiccups yet, despite my ugly backdrop here. There's no technical hiccups so far on the show. It's worked. But I'm going to attempt to share the screen here, because a couple days ago, I actually got a text message from Jamie Lynch. He's the first person that tipped me off to it. The Chuck from Mt Airy dropped an F-bomb and it made it on the air because he was yelling at Jack. So let me see if we can get this to work here. All right. So this is Chuck from Mt Airy on WIP. Just a couple. This was, I guess, on Tuesday. So it's the day after the game. Here he is.
Oh, no.
When you talk about the Eagles, you know what? You a screwed up hoe. You suck as a fucking hoe. I don't suck. I'm actually very good. Nah, disagree. You sit there, you run your freaking mouth. would you stop being a baby? Would you just talk about the Eagles? Oh, wow. Chill, Bill. I hope you caught that. Yeah, Buzz. I mean, holy cow.
Well, it was not caught. Kevin Kinkead. It was not caught.
Is that a suspension?
And,
Jamie said he was suspended like 2 days for missing a Charlie Manuel.
Which was
customer.
totally out of line. And let me say this as being a former producer that had to wear many hats doing that. They're on location. Dan Wilson he was screening a phone call. And unless you tell him, Dan, dump that, and he confirms it, you have to assume that it did not get dumped, which it didn't. It's tough on Dan. If you don't catch it, and that wasn't, if someone comes on the air and says, fuck, you're going to know to hit the dump button. But if you slide in an F-bomb and you're screening a phone call, it's easy to miss, especially if they're on location.
Yeah.
So I don't blame Dan at all for that. It's a tough spot to be in. And yeah, Jamie Lynch, who joined us last night, had said that Charlie Manuel slid in an F-bomb when he was doing his Charlie Manuel show with Anthony and Glenn, and Jamie got suspended for it. It's also on the host too. The host has to there's an on-site engineer that needs to also be responsible for that as well, that say, hey, dump that. So anyway, Chuck did that. I'm told that Chuck has been suspended from the show. I did not hear that, but people were telling me last night that Chuck has been banned from the show, at least temporarily.
Well, that's new information. I think you've just shared some breaking news here.
Well, I can't confirm it. That was just a report that was out there.
Oh, okay. So sources close to the situation.
Right. So just like you, Kevin, I do the same. My first episode, I could have went for Jason Kelsey or Brandon Graham or Nick Sirianni. I went from Herb from Northeast Philly. So you and Crossing Broad, you and Kyle, you get Chuck from Mount Airy on the program yesterday.
Yeah, Kyle went and got him. Yeah, I think he was asking for a booking fee too. I'm not sure if we paid him or not. Maybe we just slipped him like $20. I'm not sure. I really don't know. I'd have to pay.
I was told he asked for $150.
Oh, he asked for $150?
That's what I was told.
Yeah. Well, I hope we turn that down.
Well, he did.
I don't even think I'm making 100.
Yeah, you're not getting 150 for doing.
Am I making 150 this week? I'm not sure if I am. But,
you're not. So here's Chuck from Mount Airy yesterday on the Crossing broadcast with Kevin and Kyle.
I want everybody to listen. Jack kept cutting me off because I guess he didn't know how to shut up and let Chuck from Mount Airy speak. I guess he forgot how the ratings shot sky high in WIP. Not to toot my own horn, but it's some great callers that call that station that make their job a hell of a lot easier. Believe that.
They have been good to you. Do you feel in hindsight like you should have told Jack to shut the fuck up?
They'd be good to me, but I also be good to them. Let's not get this misconstrued. Johnny Marks and Ike Reese show was successful, and it wasn't successful because of Johnny Marks and Ike Reese, just because of them. They had a part in it. It was successful because of the people that actually call up there and make that show what it is.
Oh, wow. So you think callers are why they're dominating 97.5 right now?
Ain't no doubt about it. Listen, I think the callers are a very integral part into what they do. Trying to make it seem like Chuck from Mount Airy wasn't a big part of what the show is. Or OG Wade wasn't a big part of what the show is. Or Yoshi wasn't a big part of what the show is. Or Mad Mike wasn't a big part of what the show is. Us as callers are a big part of what that program is, okay? And I'm the biggest one. And I ain't trying to toot my horn, I'm keeping it real. So people like Kevin Kinkead, Kevin, I know you're listening. They don't want us to call up once a week. It's a new era, it's a new time, buddy. You know what I mean? People love to listen to us, whether you like it or not, especially me.
There you go. Well, there he is, Kevin. Did he know that you were on the interview or no?
Yeah. Yes.
I know you're listening. He does know you're listening.
Yeah, but he was Kyle just had him on the phone. He just held his phone. This is how we did it on StreamYard. He just held his phone up to the
Gotcha. I did that with Herb for the first part of his segment.
You getting Herb all set up was like us trying to get Fran Dunphy on his iPad to figure out how to get on StreamYard. Right? LaSalle's AD was like on the phone with him. He's like, all right, now you're gonna go to your keyboard and type 4RY. It's like my parents tried to figure out AOL 97 or whatever. But did you notice there that Chuck said the callers are an intricate part of the show? He meant to say integral.
I did.
Yeah,
integral.
Yeah, right. But
close.
Yeah, that was pretty audacious, man. I mean, he basically said that you and Ike, the hosts of the show, were not the reason why the show was good.
We were a part of it, which I appreciate. Chuck making us a part of it.
he did concede that point. Even though
Right,
it was
well,
Chuck's show, you guys did a good job too.
Well, listen, I appreciate Chuck. I appreciate all the Marks and Reese callers. That the callers don't have the impact on the show unless it's designed to do that. And I know it drives a lot of people crazy right here on the chat right now. People are saying, "Oh, I turn it off when those guys call in or whatever." But here's always been my philosophy on callers is that I'd rather have guys that I know are good callers. And there's a fine line when a guy calls in every day or they call in every show. It can be a turn off and it can be a tune out, which we're always worried about. But I mean, honestly, a lot of the callers that aren't regular callers suck when they call in. Like, I don't really, honestly, how many callers actually call in where you say like, oh, that's a good point? I mean, they're more or less just calling in. You're giving them their 90 seconds so they can make their point and they're gone, which is fine. But like for me, Chuck's craziness, and he's crazy. I mean, Chuck scared me a little bit before when we were going through some things. He's nuts. He is. But I'm a Howard Stern kid. I grew up listening to Howard Stern. His Whack Pack was always something that I enjoyed more than anything. People talk about Howard Stern's interviews and, oh, he does the best interviews. I always enjoyed the nonsense with Beetlejuice and Hank and Crazy Cabby and whatever. So that's always something that I wanted to incorporate in any show that I was doing. And that really became a big part of the show. Angelo had that with his Dirty 30. It was different, but like that was his audience. That was his callers. The Marks and Reese callers were different than that. But I mean, I guess it's the same kind of idea. But what Chuck needs to understand is that them alone coming on, it has to be set up by us. And it has to be like, my whole thing was to pit the callers against each other. You know what I mean? Like I was like, oh, Chuck's the number one caller now, or now it's Rios from North Philly's the number one caller, right? Like Andy from Deptford's annoying and people hate him. Chuck, we fight or we don't fight or whatever. But like, I don't know, it just makes it fun. But without the host of the show.
Yeah, well, sports talk radio has to be entertaining too. It has to be. That's our thing at Crossing Broad too. I mean, we're not doing big J journalism. We're not doing like 2,000 word athletic stories. If you can find something informative and entertaining at the same time, if you learn something but you get a laugh out of it too, then like that's kind of the goal for us. And like so, I get that side of it. My thing with the callers has always been like, I just don't want to hear from people who are not like experts on the subject matter. Like pick any topic, pick like, I don't know, biochemistry or something. If somebody was doing biochemistry talk radio and I called in, does anybody give a shit what I have to say? Because I don't know anything about biochemistry. Like the hosts are the experts on the subject matter. So I don't think that like, Bobby from Mayfair has anything to contribute, because why do I care what Bobby from Mayfair thinks about the Eagles? We should run the ball and, fire Sirianni, so I always come at it from more of like a, what do the callers add? The callers add entertainment. Do they elevate the level of discourse? And that's always been my take. It's no, I don't think they elevate the level of the discourse, So.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think when John Kinkead came here and he said that he was going to be not doing callers and not doing as many callers, it's all about how you use the callers, right? At WIP, you're essentially putting a topic out there, hoping you need callers to do it, right? Like you're putting a question like the Eagles suck or the Eagles don't suck. Like yesterday was probably, are you okay with Nick Sirianni coming back as coach? Some people will say yes. Other people will say no. One host will say yes. The other host will say no, right? Like you're trying to create a conversation. And if you don't have the callers, it doesn't work. You need the callers to drive that. But to your point, Kevin, it doesn't make it interesting. Right. So you need to have the whack pack, for lack of a better term, to call in to make things interesting.
Yeah. And I'd say that my philosophy extends beyond sports talk radio too. I mean, you know what I think is interesting? Like, look at how many people push back on like traditional sports media now. Jeff McClain takes a lot of shit. Marcus Hayes takes a lot of shit. There's a lot of like fan types who were like, cheering when Fletcher Cox calls somebody a clown. You know what I mean? So it's like people aren't, I don't know how many people are looking for that old school traditional sports journalism anyway. And there are sports writers out there. I would say this. Nobody thinks more highly of sports journalism than the sports journalists, right? I mean, like they act like it's like, like Peter Arnett is in Baghdad holding a microphone, wearing a helmet. Like that's real journalism to me. Like these people are like, well, is Jason Kelsey going to retire? It's like at the end of the day, yes, I respect what people are doing, and there's like approaches to the discipline, but we're not covering like the January 6th hearings here. You know what I mean? These are fans, like sports fans. They're looking for a certain thing now, and a lot of them don't like the media. So sports talk radio, Crossing Broad, the blogs, we exist in this side of the Venn diagram where we're not trying to do like
we're not traditional journalism,
big J stuff. You know what I mean? But we still try to inform at the same time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, like you realize that people are coming to you for the information and they want to know what's going on, but this isn't Pro Football Focus that we're doing, right? So you're going to have the idiots that call. I mean, the idiots make it interesting. You actually mentioned, moving on here, you mentioned Adam Schefter, and did you guys talk about this yesterday on Crossing Broadcast, you and Kyle, about Schefter putting the retirement thing out there?
Yeah, Kyle's take was just like some stuff should be off limits, That was what he didn't think. I'll give you a parallel here. Like I knew that Ray Didinger was retiring like 2 months before he was going to do an announcement. But what do I get from like posting that on the site? Like I get some clicks off of scooping Ray Didinger on his own retirement, and we report a lot of things about this person's going to this newspaper, this person's leaving this or this person's that. But like the one thing we lay off retirements. We lay off buyouts. Like I usually let those guys announce what they're doing. We do kind of draw the line there. And I guess his take was just like, Schefter should just kind of lay off that and let him do his thing with that,
Sure, but that's not what he does though. Right? Adam Schefter is an information robot.
He's not a journalist.
He's not a journalist. And when I say things like that, people are like, he's got 10 million Twitter followers. That's not what I'm saying. I'll give you an example that's not Adam Schefter. Diana Rossini, and whatever. I always go back to this, and I don't know why, but it's the first thing I think of. When AJ Brown was a Falcon, and they were trying to trade him, Diana Rossini puts out a tweet that says that there's teams that are interested in AJ Brown offering first-round draft picks, which was clearly bullshit, and was put out there by the Falcons to try to drum up interest because they didn't get a first-round draft pick for him. They were lucky to get a second-round draft pick. My point is they're used as pawns to put misinformation or bullshit out there. And once they're given something, they're not looking at it and saying, okay, does this make sense? Let me call his agent and see, is there really offers from other teams for first-round draft picks? Let me try to cross-check what I'm being told by the Falcons or whatever team to make sure this is legit. They don't care about that. They care about putting out the information so it gets the tweets, so it gets the clicks, and then they're considered an insider. That's Schefter. That's Rap Sheet. That's Rossini. That's all these reporters. And you have to realize that's just what they are. But like Adam Schefter's he's not doing anything other than cutting and pasting half of the time. He can't really talk about what's going on in the NFL. He doesn't know shit. Right? But like that's what he does. And if you realize that's what he does, when he is told that Jason Kelsey is going to retire, and when he's telling his teammates he's going to retire, guess what he's going to put out there? Jason Kelsey's going to retire. Should he not do it? Like I wouldn't do it. I'm not a journalist. I hear stuff all the time. I can verify things. I'm not putting it out there. I don't want to be the guy that puts it out there. He wants to be the guy that puts it out there. So and that's what he's going to do. So I'm just like numb to it by now.
Yeah. I mean, no, it just goes back to that original point that like journalism is not, or what they do is not journalism. It's just the brokerage of information. It's information trading, really, is what it is. It's like a help me, help you kind of thing. I'll be, your mouthpiece for this agent or for this general manager or whatever. I mean, those emails came out between him and the Redskins guy, Bruce, the Washington football team at the time. But yeah, they don't do like what we do, and like I could get Anthony Sanfilippo on here and he and I could do a whole 3 hours with you about like what goes into source reporting and information sharing and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times what happens is people get tangled up with like agents and then they become like connected to them, because that's where their source of information comes from. And like, you just kind of carry water for them. I would, my best run that I had was like probably like 7 or 8 years ago. I was like ripping off Philadelphia Union story after Philadelphia Union story. And the best way that I could ever break news was by using proxies. So essentially what happens is like, if you're talking to somebody and they give you information directly, you don't know if it's really true or not, or if they have a motive behind it. You know what I'm saying? But if they give that information to somebody else, and then that somebody else gives it to you, then they don't know they're giving it to you, and so they can't put a spin on it, or they can't bullshit their way through it or anything like that.
Right.
That's how I got like pure unfiltered stuff from people who are getting it firsthand from somebody else. And like I developed like 3 or 4 of those, and I was just like ripping off story after story. But you get a lot of people just get like tangled up with like GMs and agents and all that stuff, and you can very easily tell who's taking information from who and who's working with what front office. You know, it's pretty transparent now.
Yeah, it is. And Woj back in the day, you remember what happened with Woj and Joe Dumars? They suspected Joe Dumars was the source of leaks. So they gave Joe Dumars like a separate email than they gave everybody else. And Woj had the exact wording of the email, and he got caught. He got fined a couple $100,000 for it.
Yeah.
So like Woj is doing the same thing that Schefter and all these other guys that are doing, is like they're trying to control the information. They're a part of the machine, and they're making millions doing it. Why the hell not? Right? Like this idea, like you had said, the Marcus Hayeses, and I love Marcus, and the other Jeff McClain's, the journalists, that's over. You have a couple of guys, and you have the newspaper guys that I respect that are real journalists. That's not Adam Schefter. Adam Schefter is exactly what you think he is.
Yeah. And the one question I hear a lot is like, why don't the local reporters ever have information, or why don't they ever get scoops or anything? Well, because they're taught, the general managers and the front offices and the agents and the league offices are talking directly to these other reporters. You know, like some of the MLS guys, to keep with that example, direct line to the league office. So of course, like Joe Schmo, who covers the Columbus Crew for the like Ohio, whatever it's called, like of course he's not going to get any scoops, because a signing comes in, the paperwork is and the international transfer certificates, you know, stuff is filed, and then it goes straight from a league office source right to a national reporter. So yeah, I mean, that's why I think when you see scoops from local guys, if they're accurate, got to give them a lot of credit for that, because that's they're not a direct conduit or a leak or anything like that, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know if there's lines on it or not. I mean, like I can just say that I wouldn't, if I had like if I knew Jason Kelce was retiring, I would say let's just let him announce it on his own, you know.
Yeah, I would too, but no one should be surprised Adam Schefter is going to do what he's going to do. All right. Well, listen, Kevin, it's been fun. You do your Crossing broadcast Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon. Yeah,
we're Mondays and Wednesdays right now. Noon.
Oh, Mondays and Wednesdays, because today's Thursday. Yeah, today's Thursday.
That is correct. Yeah, Kyle Pagan, and myself. Johnny came on with us a couple weeks ago. If people haven't seen that yet, that was a good show. So I appreciate you returning the favor, man.
Yeah, and that's actually where I wanted to wrap up, because I didn't want to make this a headline. You know this because I told you, I texted you about it. But after I went on the Crossing broadcast and I talked candidly about leaving WIP, and in an effort to explain the financials of the current radio business, I had said that Odyssey was $1.9 billion in debt, and they're not paying people like they once did. And they're losing money on a quarterly basis. So like, it's a matter of if not when they're going to declare for bankruptcy. Almost immediately, I heard from Odyssey that they were very unhappy at the corporate level regarding that line and the interview that I did with you. And at the time I was doing CBS Sports Radio, I was doing the national shifts on the weekend of CBS Sports Radio. I am no longer doing CBS Sports Radio because I was terminated by the company following the interview with you. So
well, how does that make you feel?
I deserved it. But
you don't. But you don't seem to care that much.
No, I don't, because I just like, I wanted to be honest and candid about it. I didn't rip the company. I wasn't killing the company. I was very fair. I spoke very highly about everybody that worked at WIP. And I wasn't blaming Odyssey for like, it was all their fault. I was just talking about the financials of being in the radio business today. And
what happened 10 days later? 10 days later, they filed for bankruptcy. So.
They filed for bankruptcy. Yes, they filed for bankruptcy, which they obviously didn't want to hear me talking about. But I mean, yeah, like I was, but a lot of people were like, Marks, you're a genius. Like, no, I'm just not an idiot. Like I follow what's going on. There's no way they were getting out of the bankruptcy. Yeah. But they didn't appreciate it because honestly, Kevin, they were they were extending me a courtesy to work at the national network, considering that I had left WIP, and it was nice of them. They didn't have to do that. And when I went on and was candid about me leaving and how it had less to do, it had something to do with financials, and then spoke about the company, I wasn't surprised. What I was surprised about was that I got a phone call from the head of programming for Odyssey. So how many stations does Odyssey have? Like 256 or something like that, whatever it is, almost 300 stations. Yeah. So Jeff Sotolano is a former program director at WIP. He left and went up to New York for CBS Radio. Yeah, maybe like 10 years ago or something like that. Now worked his way up to corporate.
He was another WISP guy too, right? Wasn't he?
He was a YSP guy, right? And so he's the head of programming. I got a phone call from him. He terminated me. So for a guy that worked one weekend shift at CBS Sports Radio, it's Sunday night at 10 p.m. to get the head of programming to Odyssey to terminate me over the phone, I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I and when you told me that, I was like, oh shit, did I make John lose his CBS radio thing? And then I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, well, you made it pretty clear that nothing was off limits in that show, and you said what I
could have not done the show. I could have not talked about it. Yeah, I could have. But
I appreciated you for being open about it. I think people really liked that interview, and like I told you, man, I commend you for going out on your own, So, and I agree. I don't think you said anything negative about them. You just said they're going to go bankrupt, and 10 days later they filed for bankruptcy. So
they did, and it actually made me look pretty smart after they declared for bankruptcy. Here was my only thing, and we'll wrap up with this. Now, did he call me personally because he wanted to give me the respect because I was at WIP? And I didn't know him well, but he was always a big fan of mine. And he wanted to be the one to say it, and not because really Spike was in charge at the time. It makes more sense now that Spike left, but Spike was in charge of CBS Sports Radio at the time. And it was it was the corporate call, I guess, or it was his call. So did Spike say, you got to tell him, or did he want to tell me because he was pissed that I had said something? That's my only question. Was he trying to show me the respect of being the one to do it, or was he the one that wanted to kind of be like, hey, F you, you're terminated? Because it was an awkward phone call, I'll be honest.
Oh yeah,
it was awkward.
Yeah.
There was some stumbling around. He said, I don't hold any ill will towards you for leaving WIP, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't know why you would. I got nothing to do with this, so.
Well, I don't know. I guess they were just feeling like they did what they had to do. And, when you were talking about it on our show, you probably felt like you were doing what you had to do. I wonder if that was, I wonder if that's standard practice or some regular protocol. It's like, here's somebody who's still technically on our payroll and under our umbrella. It's not like you said anything that was, inflammatory or whatever. So you didn't come on our show and say fuck Odyssey and fuck this guy and all. Like then it would make a lot more sense. But I was a little like I was kind of scratching my head after you told me that, because I was like, oh, I don't think John really said anything that was incendiary. That's the word I was looking for.
No, that's not my style, Kevin. Anyway, well, I'm terminated, so this is I have no income now. Now I have to rely on DoorDash and Uber.
Do you need us to do like a GoFundMe or something? I feel partially responsible for it. Should I get the Crossing Broad readers to do a GoFundMe or something here?
You know what they were going to do? Because I was in the union at WIP. They were transferring me up to New York because it's out of New York. And they were going to make me pay you get $300 a shift.
No.
They were going to make me pay they were going to make me pay the same amount that I paid when I was a full-time WIP employee for the one shift. 18% of what I made, my only income that was coming in, the union was going to take 18% of it.
This is SAG after we're talking about.
Yes, this is SAG. This is SAG after.
I hated writing that check. That was my least favorite check to write over and over and over again, because I was the same thing too. I was a per diem guy over at Eyewitness News. I'd work like 30 to 40 hours a week. And it's like, why am I writing this shit? I'm paying them what, for the privilege to work here? It doesn't
yes, you're paying. Yes, the privilege to make not a lot of money.
Well, the fact that they were trying to, now that I know that they were trying to have you keep paying union dues despite doing like one shift a week. I mean, I would have said,
yeah. All right. Well, listen, Listen, dude, thank you. This has been fun. And I'll say this, that I really enjoy being able to talk about everybody. When you work on a radio station, even if you want to mention the other station or whatever, they're going to yell at you if you do it. You know what I mean? Like if I bring up anything over at the Fanatic, or if I'm at the Fanatic and I bring up anything at WIP, they're going to be, you can't talk about that or whatever. I love being able to talk about everything. I love being able to talk about Spike getting hired. I love being able to talk about what's going on at the Fanatic. I really enjoy. I mean, you're the closest thing to a media critic in this town, Kinkead.
Yeah, probably. Like the Inquirer doesn't do it anymore. You know, I would just say welcome officially to the you've pulled yourself out of the clutches of corporate media. You know,
I sure have.
You can say whatever you want to say. You can do whatever you want to do. You are your own boss now. You know.
Well, listen, and also one more thing. You can see that on the bottom of the screen, shopeverylittledetail.com. That is my wife's company. She makes apparel. She makes original things. She makes custom-made things. Check out our website. It's now live. You can also follow her on Instagram. You can DM with any questions that you have or whatever. They put that up there right now. Still learning this, everybody. But yeah, she's doing great with it. So just check it out. shopeverylittledetail.com. For sports apparel, whatever else you need, shopeverylittledetail.com. Kevin, I kept you longer than I thought I was going to, man, but it's been fun. Thank you.
It's all good, man. Crossing Broad never stops. I'll probably log on at like 8 o'clock tonight and write some bullshit anyway. I did 2 posts at 9 o'clock. I don't know. I just kind of hover back and forth from the computer to whatever else I'm doing, you know? So it's all good. Anytime, man. I'm happy to make time whenever. Right?
All right. Well, subscribe on YouTube. It's at John Marks Media, and then on all socials as well. And we will talk to everybody later. Thanks, Kev.